Hey there guys, welcome back to This Crazy Life, our very first game review for Silent Hill 2 2024. I know what you're thinking. Austin, where's Tara? Isn't this the Mom and Son podcast? Don't worry, she's over there behind the camera, sitting with producer Dan, giving me support from behind the scenes. But we talked about doing this during our lives. You guys wanted to see some game reviews, so here's the first one. Hopefully, if this goes well, we'll have more for you. So if you like this, let me know what you think. Here's a fun fact about me. I hate scary stuff. Yeah, just my entire life I've just never been good with dealing with it. I saw the SpongeBob SquarePants movie with my brother in 2004. When we were coming out of the theater, I saw a poster for the movie Seed of Chucky, which was out about the same time, and it traumatized me for years. That's the level of weenie that we're dealing with here. But I'm not 9 anymore, I'm 30. Oh God, I'm 30. And I've been looking to expand my palette, so to speak. I don't like horror, but what I do like is good video games. So what better way to break myself in than with a good horror video game? Hopefully that's good logic. When it comes to good horror games, there's one series that stands tall as one of its defining figures, the Silent Hill series. It made its debut in 1999 on the PlayStation, and along with the Resident Evil series, is seen as something of a legend in the survival horror genre of games. They even made a couple movies based on it, and from what I hear, the 2006 one is pretty okay, and people really don't like to talk about the 2012 one. Speaking of we don't like to talk about that, the series hasn't exactly been doing super hot for a few decades now. But Konami finally dragged the corpse of this series out from the basement for a big relaunch this last year with 3 new Silent Hill projects. 2 of them sucked, and the third was a remake of what is universally regarded as the series' masterpiece, Silent Hill 2. Leading up to release, people were not optimistic about the odds of this working out given the track record of Konami and Polish dev Blooper Team's own inexperience and mixed output. And honestly, early trailers weren't doing them any favors. But against all odds, critical and fan reception has largely been very positive, selling over 1 million copies in just 3 days and sitting at an 86 on Metacritic. But I'm new to Silent Hill, and I'm new to survival horror. So how is this game gonna hook in someone like me, someone who's completely fresh to the series and the genre? Well, here are my general thoughts on what I thought going through my first time in Silent Hill 2. But first, some ground rules. First, I'm playing this game on the PlayStation 5 on normal difficulty, so my experience and critiques may reflect that. Second, this will be a spoiler-free review. Outside of the general setup of the plot, I will not be going in depth with the story, twists, and characters because frankly, that's an entire video essay in itself. If you'd like to see that, hey, let me know. Finally, I must reiterate, I am going into this game not having played the original Silent Hill 2, nor having any experience with the series beyond that. This is not a review of how Silent Hill 2 2024 is as a remake. This is a review of how Silent Hill 2024 is as a game. If you're looking for a point-by-point comparison, this is not it. Those exist on YouTube, look them up. With that out of the way, let's jump into it. Silent Hill 2 places you in the shoes of James Sunderland, a random dude who's out on a mission. Before the events of the game, James receives a letter from his wife, Mary, calling out to him and letting him know that she's waiting for him in the town of, gasp, Silent Hill. All well and good, just one problem. Mary has supposedly been dead for 3 years. So what's going on? Who knows? James sure doesn't. But this mysterious letter is the only thing he has to go off of, so he heads to Silent Hill to see if he can find some answers, meeting a few other characters along the way who are all in Silent Hill for their own reasons. But as it turns out, Silent Hill is a little wacky. So James is going to have to survive the horrors this town has to throw at him if he has any hope of discovering the truth behind the letter that called him to Silent Hill in the first place. I'm not going to talk about the story any further than this. The setup is simple. Your wife is dead, except maybe she isn't. Explore the streets of the worst goddamn city in the world to discover the truth. There's a lot, and I mean a lot more to dig into here, but to sum up, this game's story is excellent. It doesn't waste your time giving you the hook for your journey right away, and the whole game is about your quest to put these pieces together. James is such a wonderful character who doesn't ever come across as some monster-hunting badass like so many other games. He's just a guy looking for his wife. And as the plot unravels and pieces begin to fall into place, I couldn't help but be fully engrossed by his story, his history, his flaws, and what drives him as a person. And it's not just James either. Silent Hill 2 has a pretty small cast, but everyone is engaging in their own right. All these people drawn to Silent Hill for their own reasons, slowly uncovering the truth with each encounter with them, all unique and distinct in their own right, some lovable, some hateable, some deeply tragic, some all three. I know I'm being very, very vague here, and please forgive me for that, but it's because you really can't go much further than that without spoiling things if you haven't played it. These characters also benefit from some truly great voice acting. The delivery in this game is something really unique. It's great, but in a different way from your typical good voice acting. The way these people deliver their lines is sometimes strange, awkward, just a little bit stilted, but in a very real kind of way. It makes these characters feel more like real people, these occasional quirks and stutters in the way they talk.
I'm looking for someone very important to me.
Me too. I'm looking for my mother.
It's a very strict tightrope to walk, and somehow all these actors nail it. Narrative-driven games like this can run the risk of sacrificing replay value. After all, you experience the story once, what need do you have to experience it again? But thankfully, Silent Hill circumvents this with its New Game Plus mode and multiple endings. Silent Hill 2 has 8 endings in total, only 3 of which you can see on your first playthrough, all of which are determined by the actions you take throughout the game. It is literally impossible to see everything this game has to offer on your first playthrough. And on subsequent playthroughs, you gain access to new weapons and new side quests, which allow you to access new endings. Silent Hill 2 has one of the most engaging and interesting plots of a game I've played in a very long time, and I recommend anyone who hasn't experienced it to try and go in blind if at all possible. I'm sorry I can't go more in depth here, but if you want a full breakdown of the plot and characters, let me know, maybe I can make it happen. That being said, what do you do in this game? Silent Hill 2 is broken up into 3 pretty distinct sections: exploration, combat, and puzzle solving, all constantly feeding into each other. The basic formula is simple. The game will present you with a puzzle. That puzzle can be anything from where do I go next, to assembling a random contraption and figuring out its secrets. How do you solve that puzzle? You explore the area around you, whether that be the foggy streets of Silent Hill, or one of the select few indoor maze-like dungeons you'll find yourself trapped in. And while you're exploring, the terrors of Silent Hill will emerge from the fog and shadow, all intent on stopping you from getting any further. There's no on-screen radar or anything pointing you to your next target. Thankfully, James is pretty good at finding maps, which you can pull up anytime with the press of a button. While you explore, find points of interest, run into dead ends, and clean out each area for everything it has, James will constantly update his map, so be sure to check it constantly to make sure you haven't missed something. Despite how it may look from the footage, Silent Hill 2 is a fairly linear game. You really only have one way to go to progress, and the gameplay loop is about finding and navigating that one way. So why explore everything else? To find resources, of course, and this is where the survival part of survival horror kicks in. You'll have to open every drawer, every box, and look behind every corner to find supplies, mostly in the form of bullets or health drinks. James is a fragile boy. It doesn't take many hits to put him in danger, so every last scrap of health you can find is essential. As are the bullets, with each one a precious resource for each of the few gun types you unlock through the game. Here's the critical thing. Resources are finite. There are only so many bullets and so many health pickups in the game, and you have to find them yourself. Defeating enemies nets you nothing. They never drop any loot themselves. All you gain from defeating them is removing an obstacle in your path. As such, each enemy becomes a decision in itself. Do I engage them or not? I might have room to squeeze by and run past them safely, but I know I'll have to return to this hallway sooner or later. Maybe I should deal with them now and save myself a difficult return. Okay, I'll take them on now. But how? I've got a few bullets for my pistol, so I could probably take them out from a distance. But what if I miss? Or I need those bullets for a more dangerous enemy later. There's no guarantee I'll find more ammo anytime soon. So maybe I attack them with my wooden plank. It'll never break and it'll save me some ammo. But I'll be right up in the enemy's face, far more likely to take a hit. And I don't have many health drinks on me. I can't afford to lose health now. That's the design brilliance of Silent Hill 2. You're never powerless, but you're always thinking. No combat encounter is risk-free. Whether you choose to run or choose to fight, there's always the chance of something going wrong. You have guns, sure, but James isn't an expert marksman. It's easy to miss, and every time a bullet whizzes past an enemy, it breaks your heart knowing that's a bullet you might not be able to get back anytime soon. And yes, you can beat these enemies up close and personal, but enemies in Silent Hill are very aggressive. You need to know their patterns and animations inside and out. And again, James isn't some expert in combat. He's swinging and flailing wildly with each attack. You miss and you're wide open. And you can only focus on one enemy at a time in Melee, leaving you open to getting rushed by multiple baddies at once. And this gets even worse when you deal with the other world. You see, Silent Hill has two distinct states it can be in. The fog world and the other world. And it'll transition between these states in very distinct parts of the game. When you're in the other world, everything appears darker, more rustic, far more worn down, and worst of all, the enemies become a lot more dangerous. So now, every enemy encounter has far greater risk and reward attached to it. They hit harder and are way more aggressive, so there's far greater risk to taking them down. But since the other world is usually more cramped and confined than the fog world, taking them out will ensure your safety far more in the long run. Risk, reward. Then there's the puzzles. Like I said, each part of the gameplay loops into the others. So to solve puzzles, you need to explore. While you explore, you engage in combat. Once you have everything you need to solve the puzzle, it's usually a matter of logical deduction and reading into clever wordplay. One thing I find really interesting about this game is that it has two difficulty settings, one for the combat and one for the puzzles. Turn the puzzle difficulty down and they're much easier to solve. Personally, playing on normal, I found them fairly easy to piece together, but they were a welcome change of pace. There's a certain comfort in knowing that I'm not gonna get shanked in the back while I'm spinning doodads in a big thingy. The interesting thing about Silent Hill 2 is that it's not really a game that relies on scaring you in the traditional ways. No excessively loud noises, no jump scares. Mostly. So where does the fear come from? The presentation. When you're out in the town of Silent Hill, the fog obstructs most of your vision, so you never know what's ahead of you until you approach it yourself. When you're in one of the game's many dungeons, you're surrounded by darkness and cramped corridors just barely illuminated by your flashlight, creating this feeling of suffocation, oppression all around you. Enemy encounters are usually pretty telegraphed, but the game gives you a radio early on, which will buzz loudly when enemies are nearby. This adds another layer of fear to the whole game. Anticipation. When you're walking down a dark hallway and you hear your radio start to emit static, and you know immediately there's something dangerous nearby, but you have no idea where it is, that's scary. The most important thing about the radio, though, it's unreliable. It tells you an enemy is close, but it doesn't tell you where it is or what it is, which is important because there are enemies in the game that will use the radio against you. The mannequins, by far the scariest standard enemy in the game. These little assholes have one strategy: hide and seek. They plant themselves somewhere in a dark corner of the room and just wait. And while they're hiding, your radio can't detect them. So every room you enter is a mind game in itself. Is there a mannequin here? And if so, can I find it before it finds me? So yeah, that's horrifying. But adding to that is the game's sound design. Silent Hill 2 doesn't really have much of a traditional soundtrack. Like, you won't hear much music outside of the game's cutscenes and endings. When you're playing, you're hearing ambient noises, looped sound effects, subtle sounds designed to sound far but getting closer. It genuinely messed with my head when I would first enter some zones, not knowing what was genuinely happening in the environment and what was the game's soundtrack just messing with me. That being said, the actual songs in this game are great. Longtime series composer and composer of the original game, Akira Yamaoka, returned to manage the soundtrack of the remake as well, and he brings some beautiful guitar and piano pieces to this game that you wouldn't think would fit into a game as dark and heavy as Silent Hill 2, and yet somehow they just do. Original creature designer Masahiro Ito also returned to touch up on his original designs, and while the heavy lifting of the development was largely done by Blooper Team, the presence of these veterans clearly had this game going in the right direction. Every monster you encounter, despite your initial thoughts, actually have a lot of thought and meaning put into each and every one of them. And uncovering that meaning is part of Silent Hill 2's brilliance. Silent Hill 2 runs on Unreal Engine 5 and obviously looks beautiful. That being said, there are some hiccups to be noted. Like I said, I'm playing this on a base PS5 and it's running on performance mode because I'm not a psychopath. In terms of frame rate, it ran fairly smoothly, mostly devoid of any noticeable dips. But there were some hitches in the environment that caught my eye, some weird lighting effects, unusual shadows, reflections of the water acting weird. It took me out of it a bit, but frankly, I can forgive bugs as long as they don't actively impede my ability to play the game. Outside of these surface level issues, I had a fairly smooth experience. While we're on the topic of gripes though, my first playthrough of Silent Hill 2, where I was admittedly taking my time to try and explore most of the nooks and crannies, took me close to 20 hours to beat. That's a long game. A very long game. Maybe too long of a game. Not gonna lie, I think there were a few sections that could have used some tightening up, parts that didn't need to last as long as they do. It's in these sections that the game's oppressive atmosphere actually began to work to its detriment. There's a point in the game where you're put into puzzle after puzzle, gauntlet after gauntlet, with what feels like no break in between, no room to breathe. It'd be one thing if this lasted 40 minutes, an hour or so, but in this, it's like a third of the game. That's a long time to be on edge, and it genuinely became exhausting to the point where I needed to take a break from playing every now and then. That being said, it does create a unique experience. When you first enter Silent Hill, the gray frog enshrouding the entire world makes you feel uneasy and unsafe. But after this stretch, let me tell you, when I saw that outside fog again, I nearly jumped for joy. There's also an issue I had that I think is specific to the PS5 version, and it regards the radio. Like I said, it emits a loud static when enemies are close by and is otherwise silent. The problem is that this static comes through the controller, not the TV speakers. And as far as I can tell, there's no way to change that without either turning off the radio entirely or turning off your controller's speaker entirely. A lot of PS5 games like to do this, and it's always a feature I turn off where I can. So the inability to have the static be emitted through the screen instead of the controller without completely turning off one or the other is frustrating to me. That being said, that's a very personal gripe that I have, and one where I could see others having no issue with it. Silent Hill 2 captured me in a way I wasn't expecting it to. It's genuinely unnerving and scary, yes, but it's also interesting, thought-provoking, mature, and just well-designed in almost every aspect. It's not often that my biggest complaint with a game is that there's too much of the game, but if that's the most unkind thing I can think of to say about Silent Hill 2, I feel like that speaks for itself. I beat this game a few weeks ago at the time of recording this, but it is stuck in my mind in a way not many other games do. This was a game that came out originally in 2001, and its story and characters are more well thought out, complex, and mature than the solid 90% of games you see today, probably more. Heck, they're more complex and mature than a lot of movies that come out today. The gameplay loop perfectly teeters on that balance between engaging and unnerving, and every aspect of its presentation will leave you on edge, minus the occasional technical hiccup. This was my first Silent Hill game. I have no experience with the rest of the series. I don't know how this holds up compared to the original, but I've heard nothing but gushing praise for the original. So, if this remake is even close to the same level that the original is on, I get the hype. Thanks for watching, everybody. That was our very first game review on This Crazy Life. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if there are any other games you'd like me to take a look at. If you want this to continue, just let us know. Leave a comment, leave a like, support us. It helps us out a lot. Huge thanks to everyone behind the scenes who made this all possible. Hopefully, I'll see you again with another one of these very soon. Remember, guys, life's crazy. We can't change that, but we can talk about it.